The genesis of one of Minecraft's most unnerving and iconic creatures began not in the shadowy depths of a digital cave, but in the zeitgeist of internet folklore. The Enderman, a creature that has haunted the blocky landscape since 2011, was conceived by the game's original creator, Marcus Notch-Persson, as a direct and deliberate nod to a burgeoning digital cryptid, the Slender Man. One to the Slender Man mythos, born from a 2009 creative challenge on the Something Awful internet forums, depicted a tall, unnaturally thin, faceless humanoid in a black suit, known for stalking, abducting, or traumatizing people, particularly children. To 3, its horror was psychological. It was a figure of silent dread, often seen in the periphery, whose very presence warped reality and induced paranoia. This was the exact flavor of fear Notch aimed to inject into Minecraft, a game that, until that point, had featured more direct and conventional monsters like zombies, skeletons, and the explosive creeper, for he wanted to create something different, something that played on the player's mind. A monster whose threat was not just in its attack, but in its very existence within the player's world. 5. The name Enderman itself was crowdsourced from the very community it was designed to terrify. For after Notch shared early images and concepts, fans on platforms like Reddit immediately drew parallels to the slender, long-limbed internet legend. 6. In a Reddit thread, one user pointed out the resemblance, and Notch replied, christening the new mob Enderman as a tribute to the Slender Man comment, forever linking the two in the annals of gaming history. For the goal was clear: to move beyond simple jump scares and create a mob that fostered a constant state of unease. For he designed the Enderman with a revolutionary mechanic for the game. It would remain a neutral, passive observer, idly moving blocks and exploring the landscape until the player committed a specific, almost intimate transgression, looking directly at its head or upper body. This single design choice was a stroke of psychological genius. It weaponized the player's own gaze, turning a fundamental aspect of first-person gameplay into a potential trigger for a terrifying confrontation. Players were no longer just scanning the horizon for threats. They had to be mindful of where they looked, to avert their eyes from the tall, dark figures they might spot in the distance. This mechanic forced a new level of awareness and fear, making every encounter a tense exercise in self-control. One for the creature that first materialized in Minecraft's development builds was a visually distinct entity from the one players know today, the earliest iterations of the Enderman. Introduced to the public in the Beta 1.8 pre-release, featured piercing, luminous green eyes. 7/8. This choice of color created a stark, eerie contrast against its pitch black, 3-block high frame. The green hue of its eyes mirrored the color of the Ender Pearl, an item that, from its inception, was planned as the creature's signature drop. 7. These early Endermen also emitted particles of black smoke, a swirling, dark aura that further amplified their sinister and otherworldly nature. 4. 9. This visual effect suggested a being composed of shadow and soot, a creature that was perhaps not entirely solid, contributing to its ghostly and unsettling presence. As it moved through the world, it would leave a faint trail of this darkness, a visual reminder of its passage. In these initial stages of development, the Enderman's loot table was also in flux. Before the Ender Pearl had its function solidified, Notch used a placeholder item that was both surprising and telling of the mob's intended status as a rare and significant challenge. Diamonds. 7. For a brief period in a pre-release demo, felling one of these towering figures could reward the player with the most coveted mineral in the game. This was a temporary measure, a common practice in game development to use existing assets while new ones are being created, but it underscored the Enderman's intended role as a high-tier mob. The decision to make its final drop, the Ender Pearl, was a crucial step in weaving the creature into the larger narrative and progression of the game, tying it directly to the mysterious dimension that would eventually become its home. But in those first few days of its existence, the sight of a green-eyed, smoke-wreathed giant that could yield a diamond was a truly formidable and bizarre spectacle for the players who were testing the upcoming update. The fear factor was paramount. Notch wanted a creature that made you feel unsafe, a mob that would punish carelessness, The simple act of looking at it would trigger an aggressive state, causing the Enderman to freeze, its mouth agape in a silent scream, shaking violently as if in a fit of rage, behavior that remains a chilling hallmark. As soon as the player broke eye contact, the hunt would begin. For this mechanic, inspired by horror tropes like the weeping angels of Doctor Who fame, created a unique and terrifying staring contest, where the player's natural instinct to look away from danger was the very thing that sealed their fate. 10. The introduction of the Enderman in its earliest form during the Beta 1.8 pre-release unleashed a force of chaotic potential upon the meticulously crafted worlds of Minecraft players. In their first public appearance, these green-eyed monstrosities possessed an ability that was as terrifying as it was world-breaking. They could pick up and move any block. 7. This wasn't limited to common materials like dirt or sand. The initial programming allowed them to displace virtually anything, including chests, furnaces, and, most alarmingly, even bedrock. 7-11 bedrock, the indestructible block that forms the bottom layer of the overworld and the very fabric of the nether ceiling and floor, was supposed to be an immutable constant, a line that could not be crossed by player or mob alike. The idea that a creature could simply pluck it from the world and place it somewhere else was a fundamental violation of the game's physics and rules. The community's reaction was a mixture of terror and frustration. On multiplayer servers, this ability caused pandemonium. Players would return to their bases to find critical blocks missing, walls inexplicably breached, or, in the most bizarre cases, a chunk of unbreakable bedrock sitting in the middle of their wheat farm. 12. It was a form of griefing enacted not by malicious players, but by the game's own environment. An Enderman could, in theory, dismantle a player's entire fortress, one block at a time. It could tear holes in the nether ceiling, potentially allowing players to access the normally unreachable void above. The stories from this brief, chaotic period are the stuff of Minecraft legend tales of Enderman unintentionally dismantling complex redstone contraptions or creating impassable barriers of misplaced bedrock. 13. The developers at Mojang quickly recognized that this god-like power was unsustainable and detrimental to the game's balance. 11. It was one thing to have a mob that was scary. It was another to have one that could fundamentally and irreversibly alter the world in such a destructive way. The change was swift. In a subsequent update, the Enderman's block carrying ability was heavily nerfed. 11. Instead of being able to pick up any block, they were restricted to a specific, curated list of materials. This list primarily included natural, earth-toned blocks like dirt, grass, sand, gravel, and clay, as well as a few unique items like pumpkins and melons. 11. 14. 15. This adjustment preserved the unsettling character of the Enderman, the feeling that it was interacting with and changing your world without giving it the power to shatter the game's foundational rules. The image of an Enderman carrying a block of grass became iconic, a quirky and slightly menacing behavior, but a far cry from the world-editing terror of a bedrock-wielding behemoth. The era of the bedrock breakers was short-lived, but it remains a fascinating chapter in the Enderman's history. A testament to the wild and tamed ideas of Minecraft's early development, the evolution of the Enderman from its initial concept into the creature we know today was marked by significant audiovisual transformations that fundamentally reshaped its identity. One of the most impactful changes was to its sound design. In the very first pre-release, the Enderman had no unique voice. It used placeholder sounds borrowed from the common zombie. 7. Hearing the familiar, guttural groans of a zombie emanating from a tall, slender, teleporting creature was jarring and immersion-breaking for players. It was a temporary solution that didn't match the unique horror the Enderman was meant to inspire. The community quickly noted the discrepancy, and the developers knew a custom soundscape was necessary to complete the creature's persona. The new sounds that were introduced were a masterclass in unsettling audio design. Instead of monstrous roars, the Enderman was given a collection of distorted, reversed, and pitch-shifted vocalizations. 16, 17, 18. These eerie, electronic-sounding noises were actually based on human speech. When isolated and reversed, the sound files reveal phrases like hello, what's up, and look for the I spoken in a low tone. 18. This discovery by the community added a profound layer of mystery to the mob. It suggested a hidden intelligence, a lost language, or a corrupted form of communication that was just beyond the player's grasp. The idle sounds became a source of endless speculation, while the aggressive sounds aloud, screeching noise when provoked, and a sharp whoop upon teleporting became instant indicators of imminent danger, sending a shiver down the spine of any player who heard them. 19. These unique sounds gave the Enderman its voice and solidified its place as one of the most orally terrifying entities in the game. Alongside the audio overhaul, the Enderman's visual appearance also underwent a crucial and defining change. The original green eyes, while striking, were soon replaced. 8-9. This decision was reportedly made by Jens Bergensten, who had taken on a more prominent development role. The eye color was changed from green to a vibrant, glowing purple. 720. This aesthetic shift was likely motivated by a desire to create a more cohesive visual language for the Ender theme that was being developed. 21. The purple hue matched the swirling particles of the nether portals and, more importantly, would eventually match the palette of the end dimension and the end portal frames. 21. The black smoke particles that once wreathed the creature were also replaced with the same purple portal particles, visually linking its teleportation ability directly to the game's dimensional travel mechanics. 7-9. This change had a subtle but significant impact on the Enderman's feel. The green eyes had a more alien, sickly quality, while the purple eyes felt more magical and intrinsically connected to the void-like nature of the end. This decision, however, created a small but persistent visual inconsistency that fans have debated for years. The Ender Pearl, the item dropped by the Enderman, remained green. 20. This has led to countless fan theories, with some suggesting the pearl is not the eye itself, but a different organ, or that its color represents a purer, uncorrupted form of the Enderman. 7. Over time, the Enderman's core behaviors and combat mechanics were also refined to create a more balanced and challenging opponent. In its initial state, while scary, the Enderman had a significant vulnerability. It could be damaged by projectiles. Players quickly discovered that the safest way to deal with one was to build a 2-block-high shelter or pillar up and shoot it from a distance with a bow and arrow. This turned what was meant to be a terrifying encounter into a trivial, risk-free task. To eliminate this cheesing strategy and restore the mob's intended threat level, the developers made a critical change. Enderman became immune to all projectile attacks. 111. When a player fires an arrow at an Enderman, the creature now instantly teleports away just before the projectile hits, often reappearing directly behind the player. This single tweak fundamentally altered the dynamic of fighting an Enderman, forcing players into dangerous, close-quarters melee combat with a teleporting foe. 22. Another key behavioral trait that was codified was its extreme aversion to water. Initially, contact with water was simply damaging, but this was refined into a core aspect of its AI. 111. Endermen will now actively teleport away in a panic when they touch water or are exposed to rain. 14. This weakness became a vital tool for players. Carrying a bucket of water became a primary defensive strategy. Quickly placing water at one's feet could create a temporary safe zone, forcing an aggressive Enderman to keep its distance. This mechanic added a layer of strategic depth to encounters, giving players a non-combat method of managing the threat. The teleportation mechanic itself also saw adjustments, with its range and logic being tweaked over various updates to make it both a more effective escape tool for the Enderman and a more unpredictable offensive weapon against the player. These evolving behaviors transformed the Enderman from a simple, scary concept into a complex and dynamic adversary with clear strengths and exploitable weaknesses. In the modern landscape of Minecraft, the Enderman has solidified its role as a uniquely pervasive and ominous threat, distinguished by its ability to appear in all three of the game's dimensions. 11, 14, 21. This multidimensional presence makes it unlike almost any other mob and contributes significantly to its mysterious aura. In the overworld, an Enderman is a relatively rare and startling sight. It appears in dark areas at night, a lanky silhouette wandering through forests or across plains, its glowing purple eyes cutting through the darkness. Its presence here feels alien and wrong, a visitor from another reality. For a new player, the first encounter with an Enderman in the familiar landscape of the overworld is often a moment of pure terror, especially if they accidentally make eye contact and trigger its wrath. Its role in the Nether is slightly different. The fiery, hostile environment of the Nether is already teeming with danger, from explosive gusts to swarms of zombie pigmen. The addition of Enderman to this dimension, primarily in the eerie, blue-toned warped forest biomes, adds a different flavor of fear. 23 amidst the chaos of fire and lava. The Enderman represents a cold, silent, and intelligent danger. While they are less common here than in their home dimension, their ability to teleport makes them a particularly unpredictable threat in the often enclosed and treacherous terrain of the Nether. A player navigating a narrow ledge or bridging over a lava ocean can be suddenly ambushed by an Enderman they provoked from afar, making journeys through this realm even more perilous. Finally, there is the end, the Enderman's native dimension, 24 here. They are no longer rare visitors, but the dominant inhabitants. The desolate, floating islands of the end are teeming with them, spawning in large groups under the starless, void-like sky, 125 in their home turf. They are at their most formidable. Their constant, unsettling presence defines the atmosphere of the dimension. Reaching the end is the game's ultimate goal, and players arriving there find themselves in a world that is utterly hostile, populated by legions of the very creatures whose pearls they collected to open the way here. A player cannot simply avoid looking at them. The sheer number of Endermen makes accidental eye contact almost inevitable, turning any exploration or construction into a constant, nerve-wracking battle for survival. This progression, from a rare horror in the overworld to the primary obstacle in the final dimension, cements the Enderman's status as a central and iconic antagonist in the Minecraft experience. The evolution of the Enderman was significantly impacted by a major technical overhaul that occurred with the release of Minecraft 1.8, also known as the Bountiful Update. This update introduced a completely new AI system for mobs, which had been in development for some time. 26 The old AI was relatively simplistic, but the new system was designed to be more modular and sophisticated, allowing for more complex and intelligent behaviors. While this was intended to be an improvement across the board, the transition caused a number of noticeable changes and even temporary breakages in the behavior of older mobs, and the Enderman was no exception. 26 Its pathfinding. The process by which it navigates the world was fundamentally altered. 22 Before the update, the Enderman's movement, while menacing, could sometimes be clunky. With the new AI, its pathfinding became smarter and more efficient. 26 It could navigate complex terrain with greater ease, making it more relentless in its pursuit of a player. The logic governing its teleportation also became more refined. Players observed that the Enderman seemed to teleport more strategically, often attempting to position itself directly behind the player for a surprise attack. 22 However, the initial implementation of this new AI in version 1.8 also led to some quirky and unintended behaviors. For a time, players noticed that an provoked Enderman might sometimes just stand perfectly still, shaking in anger, but not advancing, making it an easy kill. 27 This bug was a result of the complex new AI not interacting perfectly with the Enderman's unique stare mechanic and was eventually fixed. Another memorable behavior from the pre-1.8 era was the staring contest, where maintaining eye contact would keep the Enderman frozen in place indefinitely. 26 The 1.8 AI update changed this, making the interaction more dynamic and less predictable. 26 These changes highlight how the Enderman's evolution is not just a story of design concepts and visual tweaks, but also a history of deep-level code and systems changing the very way the creature thinks and acts within its world. The development of the Enderman did not cease after its major revisions in the early updates. Throughout Minecraft's long history, it has continued to receive minor changes and bug fixes, often in direct response to issues identified and highlighted by the game's massive and dedicated community. 28. The list of blocks that an Enderman can pick up, for instance, has been adjusted over the years. 29, 30, 31 as new natural blocks were added to the game, such as pods allure, more recently moss blocks and mud. The Enderman's block list was updated to include them, maintaining its identity as a creature that interacts with the natural terrain. 1531. These small changes ensure that the mob's behavior remains consistent and relevant within the ever-expanding world of Minecraft. Community feedback has been particularly crucial in identifying and resolving bugs related to the Enderman's complex behavior. For many years, players on the Bedrock edition of the game noted that Endermen behaved differently and were often more difficult than their Java edition counterparts. 30. They seem to teleport more frequently and could teleport out of boats and minicarts, a common strategy used by Java players to trap and safely kill them. 28. Furthermore, the window for provoking them by looking was much shorter on Bedrock, leading to many accidental and seemingly unprovoked attacks. 30. After years of bug reports and community complaints filed on Mojang's official tracker, these inconsistencies were addressed in later updates, bringing the behavior of the Bedrock Enderman more in line with the Java version, a change celebrated by many players for making the experience fairer and less frustrating. 28. More recently, a bug affecting the Enderman's reach was fixed in the 1.20 update, adjusting the height a player needed to be to remain safe from its attacks. 33. These ongoing tweaks, driven by both developer vision and player experience, show that the evolution of the Enderman is a continuous process, a collaborative effort to refine one of Minecraft's most enigmatic and enduring digital cryptids. The world of Minecraft, at first glance, appears to be a blank canvas, a pristine and untouched wilderness awaiting the player's hand to shape it. But to the discerning eye, to the archaeologist of this blocky realm, the world is not empty. It is haunted. It is a world littered with the monuments and ruins of a civilization long vanished, a people whose story is not written in books but is etched into the very stone and sand of the landscape. This is the story of the ancient builders, a race whose ingenuity was matched only by their ambition and whose ultimate fate is whispered in the distorted ramblings of the tall, dark figures that now stalk the night. The most widely accepted and compelling theory among Minecraft's lore masters posits that this advanced race of humans, or beings very much like them, once held dominion over the overworld. They did not simply survive, they thrived. Evidence of their existence is scattered across every biome, silent testaments to a forgotten age. Deep beneath the sun-scorched sands of the desert lie hidden temples, intricate structures of sandstone built around a treacherous trap. The very design of these temples speaks of a sophisticated culture. They were not mere shelters. The central chamber, with its pressure plate trigger and TNT payload, suggests a purpose of protection, perhaps to guard the treasures of a buried king or to deter grave robbers from disturbing a sacred resting place. The precious gold, iron, and occasional enchanted book found within their chests are the last vestiges of a society that valued wealth, power, and knowledge. In the humid, oppressive depths of the jungle, other temples stand, draped in vines and reclaimed by mossy cobblestone. Their architecture is different, more labyrinthine, featuring tripwires, dispensers firing arrows, and hidden levers. This points to a people who understood complex mechanical engineering, the fundamentals of what players now call redstone, and used it not for industry, but for defense and ritual. These were not primitive hunter-gatherers. These were architects, engineers, and perhaps even priests. Their industry is most starkly evident in the vast, continent-spanning networks of abandoned mineshafts that crisscross the underground. These are not natural cave formations. The uniform wooden supports, the neatly laid rails, and the forgotten minicarts filled with loot speak of a massive, organized effort to extract the world's resources. They tunneled deep into the earth, chasing veins of coal, iron, and the coveted diamond. These mines fueled their civilization, providing the raw materials for their tools, their armor, and their grand constructions. Occasionally, Within these dark tunnels, one might find a chest containing melon or pumpkin seeds, suggesting they even practiced subterranean agriculture to sustain their mining operations far from the sunlit surface. But their ambition reached beyond the overworld. The presence of ruined nether portals, weeping obsidian frames scattered across the landscape, proves that they discovered how to tear a hole in reality itself and step into the fiery hellscape of the nether. Within that dimension, they built colossal fortresses of dark, reddish brick, structures that defy gravity and wind through the nether's cavernous spaces. These fortresses were clearly military installations, built to withstand the hostile environment and its fiery inhabitants. The presence of blaze spawners suggests they may have even learned to harness the elemental creatures of that realm, perhaps as a power source or as guardians. They braved the horrors of the nether to gather its unique resources: the glowing soul sand, the ghostly ghost tears, and the fiery blaze rods that were essential for the advanced art of potion brewing, an art whose remnants are still found in the brewing stands within their strongholds. The ultimate expression of their power and knowledge, however, is found in the strongholds. These are the most complex and significant structures they left behind. Buried deep underground, these sprawling subterranean labyrinths of stone brick are a marvel of construction, featuring libraries, storerooms, and prison cells. The libraries are perhaps the most poignant clue to their nature. The sheer volume of bookshelves speaks to a culture that revered knowledge, a people who recorded their history, their science, and their stories. Though the books themselves are now empty to the player, their presence implies a lost literature, a history that has faded into dust. The strongholds were the pinnacle of their civilization, the centers of their power and learning. But they were also their last refuge. The downfall of this great civilization was not a slow decline, but a sudden and catastrophic event. An existential threat so profound that it forced them to abandon their entire world. The leading theory points to an act of supreme hubris, the creation of the Wither. The ingredients for summoning this monstrous creature soul sand from the nether and the skulls of wither skeletons that patrol their dark fortresses were resources the builders had access to and likely experimented with. Perhaps they sought to conquer death, to create an undead servant of immense power. But they created something they could not control. The Wither is a being of pure destruction. It fires explosive skulls that wither and decay all living things, and it can shatter almost any block, tearing through the landscape and their carefully constructed cities with terrifying ease. Its very presence is a blight upon the world. Faced with this self-inflicted apocalypse, a plague of their own making that was consuming the overworld, the ancient builders were forced into a desperate flight. Their magnificent cities fell to ruin, their temples were buried by sand and time, and their world became a hunting ground for the undead monstrosity they had unleashed. Their last act was to convert their centers of knowledge into bunkers. The strongholds became their fallout shelters, their final stand against the encroaching doom. It is within these besieged fortresses that they enacted their final, desperate plan, an escape to another dimension. They poured all of their remaining knowledge and resources into activating a gateway they had discovered, a strange, eerie structure they had built in the heart of each stronghold, an end portal. Using the fiery blaze powder from the nether and the enigmatic ender pearls perhaps harvested from a few early, strange visitors from the other side, or perhaps created through their own esoteric science, they crafted the Eyes of Ender needed to activate the dormant portal. They gathered what they could, their people flooding into these underground bunkers, and one by one, they lit the 12 frames and tore open a shimmering, star-filled rift in spacetime. They fled not to conquer a new world, but to escape the ashes of their old one. The journey through the portal was likely a disorienting, terrifying experience, a plunge through a reality that was not reality, a swirling vortex of blackness and stars. But any hope they had for finding a new paradise, a pristine world to rebuild their shattered civilization, was immediately and cruelly extinguished upon their arrival. They emerged onto a bleak, floating island of pale, yellowish stone, adrift in an endless, oppressive void beneath a static, Starless sky, this was the end. It was a dimension of profound and absolute emptiness. There were no trees, no water, no animals, no sun or moon. There was only the pale and stone pillars of obsidian reaching towards the void, and a profound, deafening silence. The escape from the Wither had been successful, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. They had traded a world of fiery destruction for a world of sterile desolation. The most tragic element of their desperate gambit, the detail that sealed their fate, was the nature of the portal itself. The theory suggests that the end portal was a one-way passage. While it could be activated from the overworld using the Eyes of Ender, there was no corresponding mechanism to reopen it from the other side. There were no natural resources in the end to craft new Eyes of Ender, no blazes to get blaze powder from, and certainly no way to construct a new portal frame. They were trapped. The shimmering gateway they had poured through, their last hope, likely faded behind them, leaving them stranded on their rocky prison island. The dawning horror of this realization must have been unimaginable. They were the survivors of a world-ending apocalypse, only to find themselves marooned in a silent, barren purgatory with no hope of return. Their escape was not a new beginning, but the beginning of a slow, agonizing end. They had fled the end of their world only to arrive at the end of all things, trapped in the desolate, lightless void of the end. The once great civilization of the ancient builders began an irreversible and tragic transformation. The very environment that had saved them from the Wither now became their prison and their crucible. Deprived of the familiar resources of the overworld, the sun, the water, the rich soil, the diverse flora and fauna, they were forced to adapt or perish. The generations that followed the initial exodus faced a reality of extreme scarcity. Their old knowledge of farming, architecture, and engineering became useless in a realm where there was nothing to build with and nothing to grow, the only source of sustenance. The only life in this entire dimension was the strange, alien plant that grew in eerie, petrified forests on the outer islands. The chorus plant, this bizarre, tree-like flora became the cornerstone of their new diet and, ultimately, the catalyst for their mutation. The chorus fruit, when eaten, had a peculiar and unpredictable side effect. It could cause the consumer to teleport short distances. For a people desperate for any advantage, any new tool for survival, this property may have been seen as a blessing. They would have cultivated the chorus plants, making the fruit a staple of their diet. Over generations of consuming nothing but this teleportation-inducing food, its properties began to seep into their very being. Their biology began to change, rewriting their genetic code. Their bodies grew taller and unnaturally slender. Adapting to the low gravity of the end, their skin darkened to a pitch black, perhaps as a form of camouflage in the Twilight realm or as a reaction to the strange energies of the void. Their limbs elongated, their arms and legs stretching to disproportionate lengths, the constant, involuntary teleportation caused by the chorus fruit diet eventually became a conscious, controllable ability. They learned to warp through space at will, the whoop of their arrival and departure becoming their new mode of transport. This physical transformation was accompanied by a slow erosion of their minds and culture. The silence and desolation of the end, the trauma of their exile, and the profound lack of stimulus caused their advanced intellect to atrophy. Their language, once complex enough to fill the libraries of their strongholds, devolved. It broke down into a series of distorted, reversed phrases, the garbled echoes of their old tongue. The sounds they make now which, when reversed, sound like hello or what's up, are the last faded remnants of a lost language, a ghostly memory of a time when they could communicate with meaning and purpose. Their intelligence did not vanish entirely, but it became alien and focused. The most poignant evidence of this faded memory is their strange obsession with moving blocks. This behavior, which seems so random and bizarre to players, is believed to be a lingering echo of their past as the ancient builders. It is an instinctual, almost pathetic attempt to continue the work of their ancestors, to build and create, even though they have forgotten why. They pick up a block of dirt or stone, carry it for a while, and place it down again, performing a fractured, meaningless pantomime of their former glory. They are ghosts haunted by the muscle memory of being builders. The Endermen we see in the game today are the final result of this long, tragic process of adaptation. They are the descendants of the human refugees, warped and twisted by generations of exile in a hostile dimension. Their fear of water is a direct consequence of their new biology. As beings infused with the teleportative energy of the end, contact with water short circuits their abilities, causing them immense pain and forcing a panicked, involuntary teleport. Their violent reaction to being looked at is also a product of their transformation. Direct eye contact may be perceived as a threat, a challenge, or it may inflict some kind of psychic pain on their no-alien minds, triggering a furious, defensive rage. They are no longer human, but they are not simple monsters either. They are a fallen people, the tragic remnants of a civilization that flew too close to the sun and found themselves imprisoned in the dark. The very name of the dimension that became their prison and their cradle is a source of intense speculation within the Minecraft community, adding another layer of metaphysical dread to the lore of the Enderman. What is the meaning of the end? On one level, it has a simple, metatextual interpretation. It is the dimension the player must reach to finish the game's primary progression, to defeat the final boss and see the credits roll. It is, quite literally, the end of the game. Marcus Notchpearson, the game's creator, was known for his sometimes playful and straightforward naming conventions, so this explanation is entirely plausible and likely part of the original intent. The name serves as a clear signpost for the player, marking the final frontier of their adventure. However, the in-world implications of the name are far more chilling and profound. For the ancient builders who fled there, the name would have taken on a much darker, more literal meaning. It was the end of their civilization, the end of their history, and the end of all hope for a return to their home. It was the final, desolate chapter in their story. But the theories go even deeper. Some speculate that the end is not just a place, but a state of being, the literal end of the universe. It is a dimension sitting at the edge of reality, a place where the fabric of spacetime is thin and the laws of physics are breaking down. The void that surrounds the islands is not just empty space, it is true nothingness, the entropy and heat death of the cosmos made manifest. The ancient builders, in their desperate escape, didn't just travel to another planet or another galaxy. They fled to the end of time itself, becoming prisoners in the final moments of existence. This theory casts their transformation into Endermen in an even more tragic light, suggesting they have been unmade by the fundamental decay of reality. The relationship between the Enderman and the other great power in their dimension, the Ender Dragon, is one of the most debated and mysterious aspects of their lore. The Ender Dragon is the undisputed ruler of the Central Island, a massive, powerful beast that guards the exit portal back to the overworld, the very escape route the Enderman can never use. The nature of their interaction is ambiguous. One popular theory suggests that the Endermen are subservient to the dragon, that they are its minions or slaves. The dragon's presence may have been a factor in their transformation. It's powerful, reality warping or accelerating their mutation. They patrol the islands as its silent, eternal guards, protecting their master from any intruders who might dare to challenge its reign. This would explain why they become hostile to the player, who arrives with the explicit goal of slaying the dragon. In this view, the Endermen are the loyal subjects of a dark queen, the last vestiges of their society reorganized into a hive-like servitude. Another, perhaps more tragic, theory posits that the Endermen are not willing servants, but possessed or corrupted beings. The Ender Dragon's breath, a swirling cloud of purple energy, is known to have potent magical properties. It is possible that this breath has a powerful psychological effect on the Endermen, bending their will to the dragon's own or driving them into a state of perpetual, mindless rage. They might not be protecting the dragon out of loyalty, but because they are magically compelled to do so, their minds enslaved by the very creature that dominates their home. This theory paints them as victims twice over, first exiled to the end, then mentally subjugated by its draconic overlord. A third perspective flips the relationship entirely, suggesting that the Endermen are not the dragon's servants, but its protectors or even its creators. Perhaps the ancient builders, in their attempts to survive and control their new home, tried to create a powerful being to serve them. Just as they had tried with the Wither, the Ender Dragon could be the result of such an experiment gone awry, a guardian that grew too powerful and enslaved its masters. In this scenario, the Endermen wander their home as failed zookeepers, forever bound to the powerful, dangerous creature they brought into existence. The lore of the Enderman is not confined to the dimensions players can visit. It extends into the realm of myth and removed features, most notably with the legend of the Farlander long ago, in the early beta stages of Minecraft. The world generation had a famous bug. As a player traveled millions of blocks from the center of the world, floating point inaccuracies in the game's code would cause the terrain to become increasingly distorted and fractured. This surreal, glitchy landscape was known as the Far Lands. It was a place where the rules of the world broke down, creating colossal walls of stone and bizarre, stretched-out landscapes. The Far Lands were eventually removed from the game, but their memory lives on in community folklore. Out of this legend grew the myth of a unique creature that was said to inhabit these broken realms, the Farlander. This creature was envisioned by the community as a different type of Enderman, sometimes depicted as white or gray, with different abilities and behaviors. While the Farlander was never an official mob, the idea became so popular that it has inspired countless mods and fan creations. The theory behind the Farlander is that not all of the ancient builders fled to the end. Some, perhaps, traveled to the geographical edges of the overworld, helping to outrun the Wither's destruction by simply going as far as they could. In the bizarre, reality-distorting environment of the Far Lands, this separate group would have undergone a different kind of transformation. Instead of being warped by the chorus fruit and the void of the end, they would have been mutated by the glitchy physics of the Far Lands itself. This theory proposes a divergent evolutionary path for the lost civilization. The Endermen are the descendants of those who fled through the portal, while the mythical Farlanders are the descendants of those who chose to run to the edge of the world. The legend of this white Enderman adds a fascinating what-if scenario to the lore, a ghost story born from a software bug, suggesting that the echoes of the lost civilization may be found not only in other dimensions but also in the forgotten, broken edges of the overworld itself. The story of the Enderman begins in the summer of 2011, a period of explosive growth and creative ferment for Minecraft. The game, still in its beta phase, had already captured the imagination of millions with its simple yet profound premise of survival and creation. The cast of creatures that populated its nights was small and, by that point, well understood. Players had learned the shambling gait of the zombie, the rattling archery of the skeleton, the skittering, wall-climbing tactics of the spider, and, most famously, the silent, tense approach of the creeper. The creeper, in particular, represented Minecraft's first foray into a more psychological form of horror. It wasn't its appearance that was truly terrifying, but its silence, its ability to turn a moment of creative focus into a sudden, explosive catastrophe. It taught players to listen, to be paranoid, to fear the quiet hiss that could spell the end of hours of work. It was a masterpiece of simple, effective monster design. Yet, Marcus Notchpearson, the game's creator, felt something was missing. The existing monsters were direct, conventional threats. They were obstacles to be overcome with a sword or a bow. In July of that year, Notch began to publicly muse about adding a new mob, one that would diverge from this pattern. He didn't just want another monster to fight. He wanted to create a creature that was genuinely creepy, something that would instill a sense of deep, unsettling dread in the player. He aimed to move beyond the jump scare of the creeper and into the realm of atmospheric horror, creating a presence that would make players feel watched, hunted, and fundamentally unsafe in their own worlds. He wanted a monster that played not on the player's health bar, but on their psyche. The conceptual seed was planted. Minecraft needed a nightmare. The cultural soil in which this seed was planted was fertile with a new kind of folklore, one born not of ancient campfires, but of the glowing screens of the internet. This was the era of the Slender Man, a digital cryptid that had captivated and terrified a generation of web-savvy users. Born in a 2009 Photoshop contest on the Something Awful forums, the Slender Man was a figure of profound and uncanny horror. Depicted as a preternaturally tall, thin man in a stark black suit, its most terrifying feature was its lack of one. Its face was a blank, white canvas, devoid of eyes, nose, or mouth. It did not charge or roar, it stalked. It appeared in the background of photographs, at the edge of forests, just outside a window. Its long, spindly limbs holding it in unnatural poses. Its threat was ambiguous and deeply psychological. It was a silent observer whose very presence seemed to warp reality and induce a specific kind of paranoia. This was precisely the flavor of fear that Notch sought to capture. As Notch began sharing his initial concepts for the new mob, a tall, dark, long-limbed creature, the community immediately drew the connection. On platforms like Reddit, where Notch was an active participant in the game's community, fans pointed out this striking resemblance to the internet's favorite biggie men. In a moment of collaborative creation that defined Minecraft's early development, Notch embraced the comparison. Acknowledging a user's comment, he officially christened the new creature the Enderman, a clever portmanteau that paid homage to its inspiration while carving out its own unique identity. The name stuck, forever linking the blocky monster to the viral legend that inspired it. The core design philosophy was solidified. This would be Minecraft's Slender Man, a creature whose horror was rooted in observation, suspense, and the violation of the player's sense of security. The stage was set for the introduction of a mob that would change the feel of the game forever. In September 2011, the public got its first taste of this new nightmare. With the release of the highly anticipated Beta 1.8 pre-release 1, the Enderman finally materialized in the game. For players eagerly testing the new update, the first encounter was an unforgettable experience. Amidst the familiar shapes of the Minecraft night, a new silhouette appeared. Impossibly tall, a 3-block-high pillar of pure blackness, moving with a strange, deliberate grace. It was unlike any other creature. It didn't shamble or skitter. It walked, and as it walked, it would occasionally stop, reach down with its long, spindly arms, and pluck a block directly from the landscape, carrying it as it continued its silent patrol. This act alone was deeply unsettling, a sign that this was not just another monster, but a being that could interact with and alter the world in the same fundamental way the player could. It was an editor, a deconstructor, and its motives were terrifyingly opaque. The creature that players met in that pre-release was visually distinct from the one that would become iconic. Its body was the same stark, absolute black, but its eyes glowed with a piercing, luminous green. This vibrant green created a stark, otherworldly contrast against its dark frame, 2 points of sickly light in the darkness. The color choice was likely tied to what was, at the time, its placeholder drop, the Ender Pearl, which was and remains a similar shade of green. These green-eyed Endermen also emitted a unique particle effect, a swirling, constant aura of black smoke. This dark mist wreathed their bodies, suggesting a being composed of shadow and soot, something not entirely solid or of this world. As it moved, it left a faint trail of this smoke, a ghostly signature marking its passage through the player's world, enhancing its sinister and ethereal nature. In these very early stages, the reward for felling one of these towering figures was as surprising as the creature itself. Before the mechanics of the Ender Pearl were fully implemented, Notch used a placeholder item for its drop table that underscored the Enderman's intended status as a major challenge, a diamond. For a brief, fleeting period, killing an Enderman could yield the single most valuable and sought-after mineral in the game. This was a common development practice, using an existing high-value asset as a stand-in, but it sent a clear message to the players at the pre-release. This was not a common pest like a zombie. This was a rare and formidable foe whose defeat merited the ultimate prize. The risk of engaging this terrifying new creature was matched by an extraordinary potential reward, creating a tense and exciting new dynamic for players exploring the updated world. However, the most defining and game-breaking feature of this initial incarnation was its block-carrying ability. In the first Beta 1.8 pre-release, there were no restrictions. An Enderman could pick up and move any block. This included not just dirt and sand, but also crucial functional blocks like chests, crafting tables, and furnaces. Most alarmingly, it included the theoretically indestructible blocks that formed the very bedrock of the world. Bedrock was supposed to be the ultimate constant, the impassable boundary at the bottom of the map and the ceiling of the Nether. It was the one block that was immune to the player's tools, to TNT. To anything, the revelation that this new creature could simply pluck a block of bedrock from the world and place it somewhere else was a fundamental violation of the game's most sacred rule. It was as if a character in a book suddenly gained the ability to erase the words on the page. The consequences of this ability were immediate and chaotic, especially on multiplayer servers. The community forums and Reddit threads exploded with stories of Enderman-induced havoc. Players would log in to find their carefully constructed bases inexplicably altered. A hole might be torn in a castle wall, with the missing stone block now sitting on the roof. A chest containing valuable items could vanish from a secure vault, only to be found deposited in an open field 100 blocks away. The most bizarre and frustrating reports involved misplaced bedrock. An Enderman could tear a hole in the floor of a base, exposing the void, or create an impassable barrier by placing a chunk of unbreakable bedrock in a doorway. This wasn't just a monster. It was a force of pure entropy, a griefing tool wielded by the game's AI. It could dismantle complex redstone contraptions, flood areas by moving water-retaining blocks, and generally wreak havoc on any player-made structure. The tales from this brief, wild period became legendary, painting a picture of an Enderman that was not just a cryptid but a god, like being with the power to unmake the world. The developers at Mojang quickly realized that while the concept was terrifyingly effective, its implementation was fundamentally broken and unsustainable. A change was needed, and it needed to come fast. As the official release of the Beta 1.8 Adventure update approached, the developers at Mojang worked to rein in the chaotic power of their new creation and refine its identity. The era of the bedrock-wielding, world-breaking Enderman was brought to a swift end. It was clear that while the idea of a block-moving mob was compelling, giving it unrestricted power was detrimental to the game. The ability was heavily nerfed. Instead of being able to interact with any block, the Enderman was now restricted to a specific, carefully curated list. This list primarily consisted of natural, earthy blocks, grass, dirt, sand, gravel, clay, as well as a few other thematic additions like pumpkins, melons, and mycelium. This simple change was a perfect compromise. It preserved the unique and unsettling character of the Enderman in the sense that it was actively interacting with and changing the player's environment without giving it the power to destroy bases or violate the fundamental physics of the world. The image of an Enderman solemnly carrying a block of grass became its new, iconic calling card, quirky, slightly menacing, and a far cry from the architectural terror it had once been. With the gameplay balance addressed, attention turned to the Enderman's audio-visual presentation. The placeholder zombie groans were replaced with a custom soundscape that would become one of the most recognizable and chilling in all of gaming. The new sounds were a masterstroke of audio design created by distorting, reversing, and pitch-shifting recorded human speech. The resulting vocalizations were alien and electronic, yet disturbingly familiar. Players and data miners soon discovered the secret hidden within these sound files. When reversed and slowed down, the Enderman's idle ramblings could be deciphered as English phrases, spoken in a low, distorted tone. Words and phrases like hello, what's up, and, most tantalizingly, look for the eye, could be clearly heard. This discovery was a bombshell for the community, transforming the Enderman from a mere monster into a profound enigma. It suggested a lost intelligence, a corrupted form of communication, a mind that was still present but fractured beyond comprehension. These ghostly whispers fueled endless speculation and laid the foundational stone for the rich fan lore that would eventually surround the creature, alongside the idle sounds. New audio cues were added for its actions, the loud, static-filled screech it emits when provoked, and the iconic, sharp whoop that accompanies its every teleportation. This unique audio identity was crucial in cementing the Enderman's status as a creature of true psychological horror. The visual overhaul was just as significant. The original, piercing green eyes were replaced with a vibrant, glowing purple. This decision, reportedly driven by lead developer Jens-Jaap Bergensten, was a key step in building a cohesive aesthetic for the Ender theme that was taking shape. The color purple was already associated with the swirling particles of nether portals and would soon define the color palette of the End dimension and the End portal frames themselves to match this. The black smoke particles that once wreathed the Enderman were also swapped for the same purple portal particles. This change visually and thematically linked the creature's teleportation ability directly to the mechanics of dimensional travel. The shift from green and smoke to purple and portals subtly altered the Enderman's perceived nature. It was less of a shadowy, soot-stained specter and more of a magical, extra-dimensional being, a creature intrinsically connected to the void between worlds. This change did, however, create a small but famous inconsistency that has been the subject of fan debate ever since. The Ender Pearl, the item the Enderman drops, remained its original shade of green, a fascinating visual discrepancy that has spawned countless theories about the Pearl's true nature. As Minecraft marched towards its full 1.0 release, the Enderman's combat mechanics were further refined to make it a more formidable and unique adversary. Players had quickly figured out that the safest way to deal with an Enderman was to exploit its height. By building a 2-block high shelter or pillaring up 3 blocks, a player could safely attack it with a bow and arrow without fear of retaliation. This cheesing strategy turned what was meant to be a terrifying encounter into a trivial, risk-free exercise in target practice to restore the intended fear factor. The developers made a critical change. Endermen were made completely immune to projectile attacks. Now, when an arrow is fired at an Enderman, it doesn't just take damage. It instantly teleports away, often reappearing directly behind the unsuspecting player. This single tweak was revolutionary. It eliminated the safe, ranged approach and forced players into dangerous, close-quarters melee combat with a teleporting, high-damage foe. To counterbalance this new strength, a key weakness was solidified: its extreme aversion to water. While it was always intended to be hurt by water, this behavior was codified into its core AI. Endermen now take damage from contact with water or rain and will teleport away in a blind panic to escape it. This gave players a vital strategic tool. A well-placed bucket of water could create a temporary safe zone, forcing an aggressive Enderman to keep its distance or break off its attack entirely. This added a welcome layer of strategic depth, providing players with a defensive, non-combat method for managing the threat. Finally, its health was doubled, from 10 hearts 20 health points to 20 hearts 40 health points, making it as durable as the player and significantly tougher than standard mobs. This trifecta of changes: projectile immunity, water weakness, and increased health crystallized the Enderman's combat identity, transforming it from a strange curiosity into a challenging and terrifying mini-boss whose every encounter was a tense and unpredictable dance with death. The final piece of the Enderman's foundational identity clicked into place with the introduction of its native home in Beta 1.9 pre-release 4. Until this point, the Ender in its name was just a word, a thematic suggestion. The Ender Pearls it dropped allowed for teleportation, a kind of personal use of Ender energy, but the destination of this energy, the source of these creatures, remained a mystery. The introduction of the End dimension gave the Enderman a context, a purpose, and a home. By finding a stronghold, repairing the portal, and stepping through the shimmering, star-filled rift, players could finally travel to the place where the Enderman originated upon arrival. The connection was immediate and undeniable. The end was a world perfectly suited to the creature's aesthetic. It was a desolate, hauntingly beautiful landscape of pale, yellowish sandstone, floating in an endless, starless void. The sky was a static, oppressive black, and the only features were colossal pillars of obsidian reaching up towards nothingness. And everywhere there were Endermen. They were no longer the rare, solitary visitors they were in the overworld. Here, they were the native population. They spawned in huge numbers, wandering the barren islands in groups, their glowing purple eyes the only points of light and color in the monochrome landscape. This update transformed the Enderman's identity. It was no longer just a random monster. It was an inhabitant of a known, albeit alien, world. It was the primary denizen of the game's final frontier. This solidified its thematic connection to the Ender Dragon, the massive beast that ruled over the central island, and cemented the Enderman's role as a key antagonist in the game's ultimate narrative arc for players. Entering the end for the first time became a moment of profound awe and terror, as they found themselves suddenly outnumbered, deep in enemy territory, surrounded on all sides by the very creatures whose pearls had granted them passage. Years after its dramatic introduction, the Enderman's evolution continued, albeit in more subtle ways. The release of Minecraft 1.8 in 2014, known as the Bountiful Update, brought with it a complete overhaul of the game's mob AI system. The old system was relatively simple, but the new one was designed to be far more sophisticated and modular, allowing for more complex and intelligent behaviors. This deep-level code change had a noticeable impact on the Enderman. Its pathfinding, the way it navigates the terrain, became significantly smarter. It could more efficiently chase a player across complex landscapes, making it a more relentless and effective pursuer. Its teleportation logic also became more refined and seemingly strategic, with players reporting that it seemed more adept at repositioning itself for a surprise attack, often appearing directly behind them. However, as is common with such major technical overhauls, the initial implementation had its quirks. Players for a time observed a bug where a provoked Enderman would sometimes simply freeze in place, shaking in its characteristic rage but failing to advance, making it an easy target. This bug, a product of the complex new AI struggling to interface with the Enderman's unique stare mechanic, was eventually ironed out, but it remains a memorable quirk from that period of the game's history. The Bountiful Update also had a profound, if indirect, impact on the lore surrounding the Enderman through a significant change to world generation. This update officially removed the Farlands in Minecraft's early beta versions. A floating point precision error in the code caused the terrain to become wildly distorted and fractured millions of blocks from the world's center. This bizarre, glitchy landscape of colossal walls and stretched-out terrain was a legendary destination for dedicated explorers, a mythical edge of the world. The 1.8 update fixed the underlying bug, making the world generate seamlessly no matter how far a player traveled. This act transformed the Farlands from a real, if difficult to reach, location into a lost legend, a feature that now existed only in old versions and community folklore. This removal breathed new life into a persistent community myth, the Farlander. The idea of a creature that inhabited these broken realms, often depicted as a white or gray variant of the Enderman, became even more potent now that its home was inaccessible. The removal of the Farlands cemented the Farlander's status as a pure cryptid, a ghost from a lost era of the game's geography. It fueled the fan theory of a divergent evolution for the ancient builders, suggesting that while one group fled to the end and became Endermen, another might have run to the physical edge of the overworld and been warped by its broken physics, becoming the mythical Farlanders. It was during this period of mechanical refinement and growing nostalgia for the game's older versions that the community's primary narrative for the Enderman truly coalesced. The ancient builder theory, a sprawling, epic piece of fan lore, is not something that was written by Mohan. Instead, it is a testament to the power of emergent narrative, a story pieced together by millions of players acting as digital archaeologists, sifting through the clues left scattered across the game world. The theory provides a tragic and compelling backstory that weaves together nearly every mysterious element of the game into a single, coherent saga. It begins with the evidence of a great civilization: the desert temples, jungle pyramids, abandoned mine shafts, and nether fortresses all point to a race of people who were master builders, engineers, and explorers. The theory posits that their ambition led to their downfall, likely through the creation of the Wither, a monstrous undead being that laid waste to their world. Fleeing this self-inflicted apocalypse, they built their last refuges, the underground strongholds, and used their ultimate technology, the end portals, to escape to another dimension. This escape, however, was a one-way trip, trapping them in the barren, desolate realm of the end, here starved of resources. Their only sustenance was the native chorus fruit. Over generations, a diet of this strange, teleportation-inducing plant transformed them. They grew tall and thin, their skin darkened, and they absorbed the plant's teleportative properties into their own biology. Their advanced language decayed into the distorted, reversed phrases we hear today, and their building instinct was reduced to the strange, compulsive moving of blocks, a faded muscle memory of their former lives. Their weakness to water became a side effect of their new ender-infused physiology, and their rage at being looked at became a symptom of their traumatized, alien minds. This comprehensive theory provides a satisfying and poignant explanation for every one of the Enderman's strange quirks, transforming it from a simple monster into the tragic, ghostly descendant of a lost civilization. The story of the Enderman is not over. It continues to be a living, evolving part of the Minecraft world. With new updates, its behavior is subtly tweaked, and its lore is expanded. The list of blocks it can carry, for instance, is periodically updated to include new natural materials added to the game, such as moss or rooted dirt, ensuring its core identity as an environmental interactor remains relevant. Bugs and inconsistencies are also continually addressed, often thanks to the diligence of the community. For years, players noted significant differences between the Java and Bedrock editions of the game, with the Bedrock Enderman being notoriously more aggressive and unpredictable. After extensive feedback on the official bug tracker, Mojang implemented changes to bring the two versions closer to parity, a move celebrated by players for creating a more consistent and fair experience. More recent updates have included subtle but important fixes, such as an adjustment to the Enderman's attack reach, demonstrating that the developers are still paying close attention to the fine details of their iconic creature. With each new update that touches the end, new wrinkles are added to the Enderman's story. The introduction of end cities and shulkers in the 1.9 combat update, for instance, provided a fascinating new chapter to the ancient builder theory. These structures suggested that after arriving in the end, the builders did not immediately devolve. For a time, they thrived, regaining their architectural prowess to build magnificent cities on the outer islands and even mastering a new form of life in the shulkers. This implies that their transformation into the Enderman we know today was a much later, more tragic decline. The community continues to be a vibrant source of new theories, exploring the Enderman's exact relationship to the Ender Dragon, the nature of the Void, and what other secrets the Dark Dimension might hold. The Enderman remains one of Minecraft's most powerful and enduring creations, a perfect synthesis of developer design and community imagination, a digital cryptid whose chronological history is still being written.